After crossing into the Warhammer universe, Qin Mo discovered that he had acquired some special abilities. For example, lightning and flames can be released out of thin air. For example, I have a lot of knowledge about technology in my mind. Even modifying physical laws. At first, Qin Mo thought he must have received a strange blessing, until he realized that he couldn't use any spiritual power at all. Keywords of the novel: Warhammer 40K, God of the Mortal World without a pop-up window, Warhammer 40K, God of the Mortal World TXT Complete Collection download, Warhammer 40K, God of the Mortal World latest chapter reading. Chapter 1, Prisoner 444. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1, Prisoner 444. Tai Long Number 1 Nest World. At the bottom of the world's largest and oldest nest city complex, also known as the Bottom Nest, a war is underway. In front of the only passage from the bottom nest to the lower nest, the Planetary Defense Forces established a position, where soldiers from the 44th Infantry Regiment and their commander, Bull, were stationed. Miscellaneous, our army ahead is fighting against the evolutionary sect, while you are slacking off. Hurry up and build supply points and defense works for me, otherwise I'll let you taste the power of the whip. Quick, fast, fast. We don't have much time to waste. Amidst the angry roars of Captain Bull, the soldiers of the infantry regiment sat in trenches carved out of metal ground, either eating or lying down to rest. No soldier would disobey the orders of their superiors, but what Bull is reprimanding is not soldiers, but another group of people. It's not the engineers busy on the battlefield, but the prisoners. These prisoners were ragged and exhausted, working numbly in the midst of roars, pouring fortifications or moving boxes. Qin Mo is one of these prisoners. His shirt has been worn down into pieces of cloth during labor, and others can see the black stripes on his upper body. These black patterns look very eerie. Although they are tattoo-like patterns on the body, they look like metal. There is still a collar around Qin Mo's neck, with the label, Prisoner 444, hanging on it. Unlike other prisoners, the collar around Qin Mo's neck is a psionic suppression collar, indicating that he is an untrained psychic. Master. As Bull continued to roar, an old man holding a scepter walked up to him and respectfully saluted the Sky Eagle. Karen. Bull raised his chin in contempt of his psychic servant. You old man always likes to interrupt me when I talk, and this time you'd better have a suitable reason. At this moment, Qin Mo raised his head to look at Buer and Kalong. A servant of a psychic is rare. The connection between the two is clearly very deep. Just on the battlefield, Karen has interrupted Bull countless times, and even though Bull was dissatisfied, he never punished Karen. They are very tired. Kalen's eyes, sunken to the point where he couldn't see his pupils, looked at the prisoners. We still need them as cannon fodder, so I suggest letting them rest for a while. Bu-er raised his eyebrows and stared at Kalong for a few seconds, then turned his head to look at Qin Mo's side. No one can lie in front of Karen. When he said these prisoners were very tired, he must have sensed it with his own spiritual power. After some thought, Bull nodded slowly in agreement. The prisoners were able to rest for a while. Immediately, a team of soldiers responsible for logistics walked over and reluctantly distributed food and water. Number 444, your food. Qin Mo received the military rations and lowered his head to take a look, only to find that they were unique to Tai Long Chow and were higher in quality than starch. There is no difference in treatment when it comes to eating, as prisoners and soldiers eat and drink the same. However, this is not because Boer treats prisoners equally, it's just because there is no way to differentiate treatment. When Qin Mo opened the packaging box of military rations, he saw a square white candle inside. It looks like a candle. And when Qin Mo dug out a spoonful of candle and put it into his mouth, he found that the taste were not as good as eating a candle. After solid food like candles enter the mouth, it gives off a pungent protein smell, which quickly turns into powder and covers the throat when it encounters saliva. At this point, it is necessary to suppress the instinct to cough, as inhaling too much before coughing will draw these powders into the trachea. After enduring discomfort and finishing his food, Qin Mo casually threw the lunch box aside and took out a somewhat torn diary from his pants pocket, carefully flipping through it. This records everything that has happened since he crossed over to the Warhammer universe. And the joy and sadness that Qin Mo experienced in the original world before crossing into the Warhammer universe. Qin Mo was very afraid of forgetting these memories, because these memories could provide him with a little psychological comfort in his dark life, so that he wouldn't collapse. The things in the diary are very plain, just like daily accounts. The approximate format is, what did Qin Mo do before, who are my family and friends, what happened when I was a child, what games and music do I like. These things are the lives of every ordinary person during the Terra 3K era. It is this plain and ordinary record that puts Qin Mo in a dirty and smelly trench, yet he can show a smile from the bottom of his heart. Qin Mo was so focused that he didn't even notice Bull and Kalong walking towards him. After standing close to Qin Mo, Bu-Er glanced at his spiritual servant with a sideways glance. Karen also looked silently at Bull. There is an incomparable understanding between the two, with just one glance understanding each other's thoughts. Boer turned his hand behind him and lowered his head to look at his waist. There hangs a chainsaw sword. Boer swayed his body left and right, and the chainsaw sword swung with the movement, hitting Qin Mo's head. Ha ha ha. Bull laughed, he really liked the scary feeling. And when Qin Mo lifted his head to look at him, he saw hatred and anger in his deep black pupils. At the moment of eye contact, Bull even had an illusion, feeling that what he was seeing was not a prisoner, but rather an ancient and terrifying existence among the stars. Spiritual beings are all of this virtue. Haha. Bull forced a smile and then looked at Karen. Kalong raised his hand, and Qin Mo's notebook floated in front of him, allowing him to flip through it. What is written on it? Is it a hallucination unique to your spiritual beings or something? Asked Boer. Karen fell silent first, then shook his head, I can't understand. Karen saw that the text in his diary was not Gothic, but a different language with a strange structure. It was only by being able to understand that he was in trouble. But this kind of text doesn't seem crazy. Unlike the eerie and twisted words that awaken spiritual power for the first time, then are corrupted and engraved everywhere. At least a preliminary judgment can be made that although Qin Mo is an untrained psychic, he is still rational. Prisoner number 444. Karen returned the diary to Qin Mo. Why were you arrested? Because I was hunted by a nobleman who went hunting in a nest, and then I chopped him into coke and got caught, Qin Mo replied. Karen fell silent, his empty eyes fixed on Qin Mo, using his psychic powers to explore the thoughts of this psychic. After waiting for a while, Burl impatiently asked, is he telling the truth? I don't know, Karen shook his head. I can't get into his head. Anyway, we need manpower now, Bull said urgently. Watching the two of them inexplicably find themselves asking questions, Qin Mo didn't know what they wanted to do. And Cameron immediately gave the answer, we need your combat ability. I have the key to the spiritual suppression collar around your neck, and I will open it if necessary. End of this chapter. Chapter 2, Artillery. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Artillery. Open the collar of a psychic. Qin Mo smiled and stared at Karen. Have you made up your mind? Spiritualists are extremely dangerous. A person who has awakened spiritual energy but has not been trained is like a time bomb. If they are just rampaging and destroying, it's not a big deal. The most deadly thing is that the soul of the psychic is projected in the subspace, which is extremely obvious. It's easy to be targeted by those four evil beings and become their tools to extend their claws into the material universe. So when Qin Mo heard that Karen had decided to open the spiritual suppression collar when necessary, he felt like he was crazy. Don't worry, I know the flaws of the psychic. Karen pointed to the scepter in his hand. I will ensure that after liberating your destructive power, you cannot survive. You will either die at the hands of the rebels or I will kill you. Upon hearing this, Qin Mo looked at the scepter. A golden scepter adorned with the double-headed eagle emblem of the Empire. It's not the old cane in front of me, but a weapon. From now on, you don't have to participate in the construction work. Keep your energy up, Karen ordered and turned to leave. Boer glanced at Qin Mo and followed Kalong along. Qin Mabai glanced at the two of them and lowered his head to draw something in his diary. He is currently doing one of the only two entertainment activities. The first is to look at past records. The second is to draw a blueprint for weapons. Even Qin Mo himself felt strange, not knowing why he suddenly became interested in scientific research, and there seemed to be something guiding him in the dark. He may not even understand calculus, but as long as he wants to study something, various theories related to it will first appear in his mind. So this is both a research process and a learning process. I might have been blessed by the treacherous, Qin Mo murmured. He muttered to himself more than once. After accidentally blurting out the real name of one of the four sub-space gods for the first time, Qin Mo remembered that this was the Warhammer universe. It is easy to be corrupted to directly say the name, especially since he is still a psychic. Perhaps because the name Ji Qi was translated by Tsinch, or perhaps for some other reason, there were no consequences, so Qin Mo didn't care as much. He was obsessed with designing a protective device called a gravity shield. A person wearing a shield can be immune to physical long-range attacks, as the shield generates a gravity field that does not affect the wearer at the center of the gravity field, while there is strong gravity within a 2-meter radius around them. Shells and bullets will be crushed as soon as they enter the vicinity of the gravity field. This protective device has been designed and only needs to be manufactured and assembled. This is not difficult for Qin Mo, he has even thought of 100 ways to make this thing perfect. Qin Mo contentedly put the diary in his pocket and then lowered his head to look at the puddle at the bottom of the trench. Strictly speaking, this puddle is not water, but coolant used by the logging gun. I don't know which clumsy guy caused it to flow out. Qin Mo's face was clearly reflected in the puddle. He admired his own face and couldn't help but sigh, Qin Mo, you are really a genius. While Qin Mo was intoxicated by his sense of achievement, he suddenly saw a very small object in the puddle. Strangely, this object is gradually becoming larger. What thing? Qin Mo curiously reached out and touched the object. When he touched it, the object trembled, making him realize that this thing was not in a puddle, but reflected off by the water in the puddle. Qin Mo raised his head and looked up. Boom! An explosion occurred in the trench, with a large amount of metal fragments flying around, followed by a thunderous roar that echoed throughout the entire position. All soldiers and prisoners stood up in terror, looking towards the direction of the explosion. That is the trench at the forefront of the position. Everyone looked bewildered and completely unresponsive. Until the second explosion appeared in the center of the position. 10 soldiers sitting together on the outskirts of the trench were located near the center of the explosion, and a dazzling flash instantly obscured them. Then, a fragment spun out of the smoke and landed at Boer's feet. Shelling is coming. Bull roared loudly, jumping first into the trench and climbing down. Karen stood next to Boer, not avoiding but striking the ground with his scepter, enveloping him and Boer with a purple energy. The first 2 rounds of shelling were clearly calibrated shots, and after the calibration was completed, a large number of shells rained down like raindrops, and the entire position was filled with explosions and screams. The shelling came too suddenly and unreasonably, to the surprise of the soldiers and prisoners, to the point where they were very scattered and didn't even have time to hide in the defensive fortifications when they were shelled. Of course, even if you want to hide, it's useless. The fortifications haven't been repaired yet, and under shelling, they rot faster than the soldiers' bodies. As the commander of the regiment, Bull shrank under the protection of Kalen and witnessed in horror as his soldiers were bombed everywhere. How could it be shelled here? Bull asked in shock. This position is located at the entrance leading to the lower nest, and the planetary defense forces enter the lower nest for combat, which means this position is equivalent to the rear. The rebel faction called the Evolutionary Sect wants to threaten this place by first defeating the front lines of the planetary defense forces. Has the front line already been penetrated? At this thought, Bull shuddered with fear. Whether it's the rebels breaking through the front line or sending small groups of troops to ambush here, the soldiers on the position have already lost more than half in the shelling. We must evacuate. Bull couldn't bear to watch anymore and shouted at Karen, "Use your psychic power to issue the retreat command." "No, this is not the time to retreat." Karen shook his head slowly, his deep pupils looking straight ahead of the position. A large number of rebel soldiers have followed the shelling and launched an attack on the position. If a retreat order is issued at this time, the entire infantry regiment will disintegrate, and the outcome of disintegrating in the lair is to be slaughtered by the familiar terrain of the rebels in the lair. That's psychic, that's psychic. Boer suddenly remembered Qin Mo, find him, open his collar, and let him push it first. Of course, I suggest changing it to only this way. Karen nodded in agreement, closed his eyes, and used his psychic powers to search for Qin Mo's position on the battlefield. Before Kalong found Qin Mo, whose face was receiving shells, was not blown apart, but his body had already been scarred by shrapnel. If someone could use thermal imaging to take a glance at the position where Qin Mo was lying, they would see a large amount of heat generated from the explosion converging towards Qin Mo and flowing into his body. Qin Mo's body gradually recovered, but his brain, which had been strongly impacted, had not fully recovered yet. He was in a state of half asleep and half awake, seeing an illusion. End of this chapter. Chapter 3, Gene Thieves. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3, Gene Thieves. In the illusion, Qin Mo wandered among the stars. Absorb the energy of stars and devour the intelligent life within the stellar system. This kind of life lasted for a long time, until Qin Mo arrived at the edge of a star system in the Milky Way and suddenly saw a beam of light. This light shattered the dimensions within the stellar system, pulling him in, and the intense energy impact even tore apart his self-awareness. The pain of being torn apart awakened Qin Mo, who emerged from his illusion and opened his eyes to look around. Surrounded by gradually dissipating smoke, one could vaguely see the approaching rebels. The air was filled with a strong smell of gunpowder. After waking up, Qin Mo's first reaction was not to run or hide, but to search for the diary in his pocket. Then he sadly realized that not only could he not find the diary, but also the pocket in which it was stored. The whole pair of pants was blown to pieces. Qin Mo lay in the trench, groping among the metal fragments while praying to the Emperor, praying that the Lord of Humanity would bless him in finding the most precious thing for him. The human lord on the golden throne seems to have really favored Qin Mo. Qin Mo finally found the diary, which was only 1 in 100. The thick diary was bombed to the point where only one page was left, and almost half of the pages were burnt out. No. Qin Mo was deeply saddened. He can rewrite the memories in this diary, but it was the last gift his mother bought him when he was 7 years old, which he had brought to this world with him before traveling. Attack! For the Lord of Evolution! For our Savior! The shouting echoed into Qin Mo's ears, and the rebels had approached the edge of the trench. Quickly, the ground trembled slightly, accompanied by the creaking sound of tracks running, proving that the rebels were not just infantry, they also had tanks. Qin Mo rolled up the remaining half of the paper in his pants and stood up angrily, looking at the rebel soldiers. These rebel soldiers are all gene thieves, hybrid products of the Tyrannosaurus Zerg and humans. These strange creatures have terrifying shapes, but Qin Mo is not afraid. He just wants to give these monsters some color to see. At this point, he was also found by Karen. Kalong traversed the battlefield at a speed that did not belong to him as an elderly person, using his psychic abilities to resist incoming bullets, with the aim of getting as close as possible to Qin Mo. When there was still 50 meters between the two sides, Karen used his psychic power to send the key to Qin Mo and said, "Quickly unlock your psychic suppression collar." But in the end, it was still a step slower. Before the key was delivered to Qin Mo, he had already been submerged by rebel soldiers. In the next second, a 360-degree fire without dead corners erupted from among the rebel soldiers, and dozens of rebel soldiers around Qin Mo and the keys flying towards him were all burned to ashes. Qin Mo floated 2 meters above the ground, with flames spurting in his eyes and electric currents surging through his body. The label with prisoner number 444 written on the spiritual suppression collar is burning. The rebel soldiers noticed that Qin Mo immediately gathered fire on him, and the tanks made by the rebels themselves stopped advancing and turned their turrets towards Qin Mo. As the target of public criticism, Qin Mo did not dodge. He raised his hand and aimed at the rebels, releasing flames and lightning in his two palms. These two attack methods were extremely efficient, and the areas swept by the flames and lightning were cleared. As for the tank that was preparing to launch an attack, it did not dodge the attack. The metal on its turret twisted and deformed, and the ammunition rack originally located in the body was pulled out of the twisted metal and then struck by lightning and exploded. The turret shattered, and flames spewed into the air from the body of the vehicle. Karen, who was watching, swore that he had never seen such a scene in his life. A psychic wearing a psychic suppression collar is using his psychic power to wreak havoc in all directions. Although the spiritual suppression collars produced by the Tyrone Galaxy are relatively backward, their ability to be paid as tithes to the Empire is enough to prove that they still have the ability to suppress spiritual energy. Retreat! Bull yelled at Karen, "Take advantage of him delaying the enemy's attack. We cannot retreat, we must hold on." Karen turned back and shouted at Bull, "It's not certain whether the front line will be penetrated. If we retreat." Halfway through the words of Kalong, he was killed by an explosion. "'Cause of death, I didn't notice a rebel soldier carrying a bomb nearby, and he was hit by lightning released by Qin Mo." Seeing Karen's body tissue and his scepter flying towards him, Bull didn't hesitate to immediately run away with the guards. Boar's vehicle is a half-man troop transport vehicle, which can fit him and his personal guard perfectly. These private guards have a total of 8 people, all wearing power armor. Although the number is not large, they do not need to charge into battle, and protecting their owners is completely sufficient. The situation was urgent, and Bull didn't wait for the guards to open the car door for him. He rushed to the door of the troop transport vehicle and pulled it open while getting on. But just as Bull sat down, he suddenly saw a person in the troop transport vehicle. This person looks like a human, but with long legs, squatting on the ground to eat the driver. The two looked at each other in an awkward atmosphere. 2 seconds later, the person screamed and rushed towards Bull. Bull waved his chainsaw sword in panic, and his guards dared not shoot and could only try to charge forward to pull the two apart. However, they found that the monster was extremely powerful, with a group of people pulling from the car to the outside. The scene was very chaotic. Not only are the personnel carriers in chaos here, but the positions are also in chaos. The soldiers fought in groups of 3 or 5, each fighting on their own. Some soldiers saw comrades in the trenches ahead and enemies in the trenches behind them. Some soldiers fought with their heads down, only to find themselves mixed among rebel soldiers. Some soldiers were suddenly suppressed by the firepower of the lumberjacks and couldn't lift their heads. They were about to curse the lumberjacks for being fools, but found out that it was rebel soldiers manipulating the lumberjacks in the rear. Part of the reason for this chaos is that the infantry regiment was unprepared for a sudden attack, but more importantly, Qin Mo was traveling among the rebels, disrupting their tactics and formation. After evading a shell and blowing up another enemy tank with a backhand, Qin Mo quickly scanned the entire position and realized that he couldn't last long fighting alone. fully exerting his spiritual power, has already exhausted Qin Mo. The bunker at the center of the position. Qin Mo shouted to his own soldiers. The shouting was immediately drowned out by the sound of gunfire. Qin Mo could only use action instead of language, rushing towards his own soldiers and helping them out one by one. Without the need for verbal commands, these soldiers knew who they should go with now. They fought and advanced along the path paved by Qin Mo, gathering with some other soldiers from their own side, and so on in a loop until more than 200 people who were still alive gathered together again. The final survivors and Qin Mo headed straight to the bunker at the center of the position. This bunker has just been built halfway and has not yet been capped, but at least there are walls and fixed logging guns as cover. End of this chapter. Chapter 4, Escaping the Siege. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4, Escaping the Siege. What should we do? I'm a prisoner. I didn't get a gun before. What else can we do? Hold on. I don't have a gun. I don't have a gun. I don't have a gun. I'll go operate the logging gun, hold my laser rifle. Some prisoners are still alive, with only tools like shovels and hammers in their hands. These are smart people who at least know they should find the soldiers around them and fight alongside them. That's why they survived. The fixed logging gun in the bunker spewed half-a-meter-long flames, and laser beams shot out from the shooting hole. The presence of these people greatly alleviated Qin Mo's pressure. He now doesn't need to clean up the enemy infantry, just stare at the people carrying bombs among the rebel infantry, and then pay attention to whether there are any armored vehicles such as tanks. But there were too many rebels, and sooner or later they could all rush to the bunker, so Qin Mo realized that he had to prepare for close combat. He scanned the battlefield while attacking the enemy. Karen died at some point, his scepter stuck on the ground. There is a chainsaw sword standing among a pile of corpses. Qin Mo immediately reached out his hand. Two weapons were suspended, spinning and flying into the bunker, landing on the ground. This is Nianli, Qin Mo's third ability besides releasing flames and lightning. Qin Mo not only cared for himself but also for others. He used his psychic power to manipulate the scattered weapons and equipment on the battlefield, found bulletproof armor, and pulled it into the bunker to distribute to others. These armor used by planetary defense forces have lower quality than those used by planetary armies, but they also have bulletproof capabilities, only to shatter after only a few rounds. In addition to bulletproof armor, Qin Mo also takes bayonets and more laser rifles, which are sub-models of the M35 rifle and can hold longer bayonets. Just as Qin Mo was focused on fighting and preparing for battle, the sound of artillery firing came from a distance. Done. The soldiers in fierce battle lifted their heads and looked up at the sky. Everyone huddled in an unopened bunker, and if the shells fell, they would be completely caught. Focus on the battle. Qin Mo stopped everything he was doing and looked up at the sky, forcing himself to remain fully focused. The shells had already flown in, and Qin Mo could sense all the shells. He even knew that there were a total of 20 shells. These shells are not a whole, and for Qin Mo, it would be a bit troublesome for him to use his last ability. After trying it out, Qin Mo shifted his attention from the shell to the air. The shells had fallen, but they did not break through the air ahead, but exploded in the air as if colliding with the ground. Qin Mo twisted some of the physical laws of the air, making it briefly as hard as metal. This was his last ability besides releasing lightning, flames, and psychic power. Qin Mo, who was not killed by the explosion, as well as the soldiers and prisoners, are about to face another test. The rebel soldiers lost a large number of personnel in the shooting, and they planned to completely submerge the stubborn enemy with a charge, so they added bayonets to their laser rifles. How much ammunition is left? Qin Mo asked the others. Report, it's gone. Upon hearing this reply, Qin Mo remained silent and opened his hands. The chainsaw sword lying on the ground floated up, with the hilt resting on Qin Mo's right hand, while the scepter was held in his left hand. The living soldiers picked up laser rifles and fitted bayonets in silence. Prisoners who have not learned to use bayonets pick up tools such as hammers and shovels. Before the hand-to-hand combat began, Qin Mo looked at the incoming enemy and wanted to say something exciting to boost morale, but he was not good at giving speeches and couldn't figure out what to say after some calculation. And at this point, this situation doesn't need to be so inspiring. Qin Mo knew that those who fought alongside him only needed a slogan. "It's my honor to fight alongside you," Qin Mo said as he held down the button on the handle of his sword. The saw-teeth of his chainsaw sword roared and spun, "For the Emperor! For the Emperor!" Everyone roared and rushed out of the bunker. A prisoner ran at the front with a shovel held high and quickly disappeared among the rebel soldiers. Qin Mo ignored the others and ran vigorously, taking off and landing at the center of the rebel army. With the right hand waving a chainsaw sword, he slashed at the enemy, and with the left hand lifting his scepter high, he forcefully hit the ground. The sea of flames without blind spots spread to clear an area in all directions, and this blank area was quickly filled by the influx of rebel soldiers, who immediately collided with the spreading lightning. "Kill him with a bomb! For the sake of the Savior!" Upon hearing the shouting, Qin Mo turned around and aimed his scepter in the direction of the shouting. A lightning bolt shot out from the double-headed eagle emblem, piercing through all enemies carrying bombs and those behind them. This use of extraordinary power made Qin Mo very excited with a feeling of 1 enemy and 100. He did not notice that the scepter did not enhance his ability, but only played a role similar to extending his arms. "Shoot them!" After turning around and killing an enemy, Qin Mo suddenly heard someone roaring. "But our fellow countrymen! Shoot them!" Qin Mo immediately became anxious. At this moment, he could not concentrate fully on modifying the laws of physics, which meant that the shelling would inevitably fall around. But just as he was worried, a flash of light appeared in the distance, followed by the roar of an explosion. I don't know where the rebels occupied the area and it was bombed, but that place is extremely important to them because they are all rushing towards the place where the explosion occurred. Even if Qin Mo's chainsaw sword struck an enemy's head, that enemy was still advancing towards the explosion site before losing consciousness completely. The battle ended when the rebels disappeared without a trace. Sleeping trough. Qin Mo sat on the ground panting heavily, looking around for the people who were still alive. And those who survived were walking towards Qin Mo wearily, sitting beside him. When entering the bunker, there were about 200 people still alive, and now there are less than 20 left. Gray. A young soldier walked forward and saluted Qin Mo with a heavenly eagle. "What are we going to do next?" "Are you asking me?" Qin Mo was somewhat surprised. "After all, I am just a prisoner, a spiritual prisoner, and these soldiers did not listen to the principles arranged by me." Upon hearing Qin Mo's doubts, Gray and the others who were still alive also felt puzzled. It was only then that they realized that they should not have listened to Qin Mo's arrangements according to reason. But the truth is one thing, and actually what to do is another matter. Let me think about it. Qin Mo didn't want to give up. After all, he not only wanted to survive, but also wanted to get rid of his identity as a prisoner. "That thing on your neck," Gray pointed to Qin Mo's neck, "doesn't it affect you? Do you need to remove it?" "What?" Qin Mo was taken aback for a moment, reached out and touched it, then remembered that he was still wearing a spiritual suppression collar around his neck. End of this chapter. Chapter 5, Individual Gravity Shield. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5, Individual Gravity Shield. I thought the collar was blown out. Qin Mo raised his hand and released flames to burn off the collar, his expression extremely shocked. Wearing a spiritual restraint collar in combat has left him greatly shocked. He no longer thinks about what to do next, but rather thinks about why he can still use his spiritual power while wearing this thing. This is not scientific at all. Releasing flames and lightning out of thin air can also affect matter in the material world, which should be a manifestation of spiritual energy. But if it's psychic, why isn't it suppressed by the collar? Qin Mo suddenly felt that his source of power may not be from the subspace, but from another source. But it is also possible that the collar cannot suppress too much spiritual power. Unfortunately, I was caught and sent to the front line the day before yesterday when I awakened my spiritual power. I was not turned away from the black ship. Otherwise, I could try to see if Sister Silent can suppress my spiritual power. If it can be suppressed, then the collar has a weak inhibitory effect. If not, then one's own power is not spiritual. No. Thinking of this, Qin Mo felt fortunate that he had not been sent to the black ship, and he could not find Sister Silent for testing in the future. Seeking knowledge is not as important as fate. What's wrong with you? Gray saw Qin Mo's face not looking good and asked in a voice. It's nothing. Qin Mo shook his head and began to ponder what to do next. Then he said to the crowd, first of all, of course we should leave this position. Then we have two choices, first, go down the channel to the nest, and second, stay and continue the battle. Upon hearing these words, everyone lowered their heads to consider. Although they didn't speak, Qin Mo estimated that these people must have chosen to go down the nest. After all, the front line may have been penetrated by the enemy, and staying here is more or less unlucky. If we leave. Gray's face was solemn. Will the friendly troops guarding the exit of the passage let us go? Although there is a shortage of manpower in the nest now, the soldiers who escape from the bottom nest should be executed, serving as a model for the defending soldiers in the next nest. However, I am only speculating whether they will be executed or not, and I don't know, Qin Mo replied. Everyone hesitated immensely. On the one hand, they really want to escape to the nest, and on the other hand, they are afraid of being executed. But this is a necessary choice, either stay in the bottom nest to face the rebels, or take a gamble to see if you will be executed. I still have my family, and if I were to be executed, they would also suffer. I must stay. Gray raised his hand. I'll stay too. I can't let my daughter and wife not even receive that pension because I became a deserter. I don't have a family, I just want to stay and kill the rebels, for the Emperor. For the Lord of Humanity. The people who chose to stay raised their hands one after another, making a total of 5 people. The remaining 13 people remained silent, but their silence had already indicated their attitude. Please leave. Qin Mo stood up and looked at the weapons of the 13 people. But please keep the weapons and ammunition, I need them. All those who decided to go to the nest stood up and saluted Qin Mo with a heavenly eagle. Whether facing higher-level nobles or military officers, these people have never saluted so rigorously and respectfully. Although Qin Mo is a prisoner, without him, everyone would not have been able to persist until the rebels withdrew, nor would there be any opportunities to choose to go and stay now. We will keep our weapons, in addition to food and water. May the Emperor bless you, loyal warriors. 13 people neatly stacked weapons and ammunition on the ground, and then stacked water bottles and military provisions on top of the weapons. One of them, who had a relatively intact military uniform, took off his clothes and boots so that Qin Mo could replace the tattered cloth strips on his body. After leaving everything that could be left behind, these people walked back in 3 steps. There were a total of 6 people who chose to stay, including Qin Mo. Although they all voluntarily stayed, they couldn't help but worry about their future situation. What are we going to do next? Find the rebels and fight, or stay on the battlefield? Gray asked. Of course, we cannot stay on the battlefield. The explosion that saved us before was obviously caused by other friendly forces. We must find the living friendly forces and join them. Qin Mo said as he sat cross-legged on the ground, starting to dismantle the laser rifle. But before that, I must do something. Gray didn't know what Qin Mo wanted to do. He watched in confusion as Qin Mo dismantled the electronic parts of the rifle and used his hand wrapped in flames to melt the shell of the rifle. The others also stared blankly. "Don't be in a daze, 2 people will go around to watch, and the rest will help me find all the metal or electronic parts that can be used," Qin Mo ordered to everyone. "Yes." Gray turned around to look at another soldier with excellent eyesight, who nodded in agreement and went to watch with Gray, holding a laser rifle. Others are searching for what Qin Mo needs on the battlefield. Half an hour later. All the weapons and other metal and electronic components that could be found on the battlefield were piled up in front of Qin Mo. Captain Bull's personnel transport vehicle cannot be brought over, but everything that can be dismantled inside has been dismantled and brought to Qin Mo's front. "Have you dismantled Boer's troop transport vehicle?" Qin Mo asked without lifting his head. "Yes, I originally wanted to fix it, but the engine of that troop transport vehicle was scratched with 3 claw marks deep into the core. That's impossible to fix." Qin Mo nodded and continued to focus on manufacturing. This scene is very novel for the soldiers. Gray found another person to watch and stood in front of Qin Mo to observe his every move. Pieces of metal melted in Qin Mo's hands and quickly cooled into a hole after being gathered together. This hard metal became soft, like rubber mud, and was kneaded by Qin Mo into any shape he wanted. 2 slender metal rods were controlled by the force of the spell to float by Qin Mo's hand. When he needed to make adjustments to the subtle details of the creation in his hand, these 2 metal rods would perform more precise work like surgical knives than human hands. At the same time, the wires and the broken electronic parts were pulled out and twisted and connected together, as if they had never broken. In Gray's curious gaze, a backpack-like object was created. "What is this?" "A backpack?" Gray asked. "Carry it on your back." Qin Mo pointed to his backpack. Gray immediately stepped forward and carried his backpack behind him, and then he felt as if he was carrying a heavy artillery shell, which was a bit heavy. "Individual gravity shield," Qin Mo said as he lifted his hand and a grenade floated towards Gray on the ground. "It can defend against live fire attacks." Gray doesn't understand what a gravity shield is, he even heard the name for the first time. So Qin Mo demonstrated, he shook his finger, and the safety of the grenade floating in front of Gray was opened. Everyone except Qin Mo is lying down. 1 second later, the grenade exploded and it exploded normally, releasing shrapnel. Then all the shrapnel was contracted and pressed onto the ground. Everyone looked at the pile of fragments on the ground in shock. As you can see, its function is to help you resist live fire attacks, but this thing is powered by rifle batteries. In theory, 1 battery can make the gravity shield run for 10 minutes, Qin Mo said calmly. He is not at all proud of this creation called the gravity shield. There is a gravity generator inside the shell of the gravity shield, which works by consuming energy to create a gravity effect. The effective range is not a circular area but a hollow circular shape. After all, the user cannot be flattened by gravity. Qin Mo studied this thing for a long time, but when it was actually manufactured, it was limited by the materials on hand, and the gravity shield he produced did not meet expectations. It is too heavy and consumes high energy, but it is not a problem to save a person's life, and there is also a special purpose. For example, during hand-to-hand combat, use a gravity shield to charge forward and backward. "What if we encounter a laser rifle?" someone asked. "The laser will pierce through you and the gravity shield together," Qin Mo answered candidly, paused, and then said, "But the laser rifles in the rebels' hands were stolen from the nest, and most of the weapons in their hands should be homemade live ammunition weapons. It's good to be able to block live ammunition, don't be too greedy," Gray agreed. Greed in terms of weapons and equipment is a good thing. Qin Mo sat down and began to create a gravity shield for others and himself. "Send 2 people to scout if there are any friendly troops nearby, and if there are, we will rush over immediately." End of this chapter. Chapter 6, Rebel Spiritualists. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 6, Rebel Spiritualists. After Gray took another person out for reconnaissance, the remaining people either continued to watch Qin Mo perform his creation magic, or searched for other possible items on the battlefield. The fact proves that the search just now was still too general, and there were many things on the battlefield that were not collected. For example, the power armor worn by Boar's guards. These power armor pieces have already been torn apart, and at first glance they look no different from tattered ones, which is why they were overlooked earlier. Officer Boer doesn't know where he went, but all of his guards were killed in action. I found the only relatively intact power armor. Two soldiers, one holding half of the power armor, walked towards Qin Mo and placed it on the ground. Someone immediately asked, "Do we need to go find Bool?" "No need." Qin Mo stared at power armor and shook his head slowly, then patted the chainsaw sword on his waist. "His chainsaw sword is in my hands." He himself should have become some torn biological tissue on the battlefield. The Emperor doesn't even know where he went. After speaking, Qin Mo focused on studying the driving force in front of him. Almost at the moment of seeing the power armor, Qin Mo's mind immediately came up with the principle and structure of this thing. This power armor is an export commodity of the Tailong Galaxy, in addition to its population and spiritual callers. These power armor pieces are all handmade by a family of craftsmen from the world of nests. The power armor is called Richard I, which is very expensive, but its performance is estimated to be the worst among the power armor used by mortals in the entire human empire. "Can you make this thing?" When a soldier asked Qin Mo, all the others present turned their eyes to Qin Mo, hoping he could say yes. Although the power armor produced by the Richardson family is not very good, it is still a power armor. Qin Mo remained silent, still staring at the power armor. The structure of this power armor and the secret technology passed down by the Richard family for generations, in Qin Mo's view, are like children's toys that he can not only imitate but also improve. However, compared to the power armor itself, Qin Mo cares more about the terrifying wounds on the power armor. What pierced through this power armor was not bullets or lasers, but claws. The chest of the power armor was embedded with 20 mm thick alloy armor to protect the heart, but it was torn apart. This proves that a relatively pure-blooded gene thief participated in the melee just now. The purer the bloodline of individuals in the gene thief population, the stronger they are. Not to mention tearing apart power armor, there is no problem tearing open the Terminator armor worn by elite interstellar warriors. "We need to be careful," Qin Mo looked up at the soldiers. "If you see an enemy crawling on the ground without weapons, you must immediately activate the gravity shield and notify me." Yes, the soldiers nodded together. But they didn't understand why Qin Mo's thinking was so suddenly jumping from the matter of power armor to the matter of the enemy. "I can replicate this type of power armor, but these worn-out pieces are no longer usable. Let's wait until we find more metal materials in the future," Qin Mo said again. Not just power A. In Qin Mo's vision, he would use his scientific research talent to arm the entire team as much as possible, regardless of cost. Because the combat effectiveness of soldiers in planetary defense forces can only be said to be stronger than that of civilians, and it is very likely that more soldiers will not be found for a long time in the future, so the combat effectiveness of these individuals can only be strengthened through weapons and equipment. "Found the friendly army." Gray rushed back and shouted to Qin Mo. "Let's go." Qin Mo put on his gravity shield and turned to leave the position. At the same time, 1 kilometer north of the position of the 44th Regiment, local planetary defense soldiers are fighting against the rebels. The soldiers are stationed in a 10-story metal building, with most of them assigned to defend the main and back doors, while the rest stand by the windows on each floor and shoot at the rebels. The officers concluded through analyzing the intelligence provided by the scouts that there were at least 20,000 rebels, 20 times more than their own. If it weren't for the sudden and inexplicable retreat of most rebels before, the number of people attacking this building would have at least tripled or even quadrupled now. The rebel soldiers looked strange and mixed with many monsters, but they were not foolish. Their infantry surrounded the tank heavily, pushing forward against a barrage of bullets. Every 10 meters of advance, the tank will come to a stop and turn its turret towards the windows of the building to fire a shot. Sometimes shells can hit metal walls and be bounced open, and sometimes with good luck, they can hit directly into windows. After gradually moving 70 meters away from the main entrance of the building, the tank no longer fired at the windows, but turned its turret to align with the main entrance and fired. There are a large number of bulletproof shelters in the lobby on the first floor, and even if shells hit them, they cannot harm the people hiding behind the shelters, but it can prevent them from protruding from behind the shelters to counterattack. Attack, attack! A commander with a large purple head opened the hatch and crawled out, shouting and giving orders to the surrounding soldiers. After watching the soldiers leave the tank and charge towards the main gate, the commander got into the car and personally operated the tank gun, aiming it at the main gate. He saw soldiers rushing into the first floor and then being harvested in patches by the suddenly lifted logging guns behind the cover. The commander smiled and fired his gun. The shells shot into the first floor and exploded. After the explosion, all the people standing up behind the bunker and heavy weapons were shattered by the shrapnel. To evolve the sect, the commander exclaimed wildly. But just as he was about to completely empty the first floor in the same way, he suddenly heard the voice of a woman in his mind. A psychic and 5 other people suddenly joined the battle, and the troops you deployed at the back door did not stop them. They had already entered the building. This is a reminder from the bishop of the Evolutionary Church. The commander had made an agreement with the bishop before the war that as a commander, he could personally pilot tanks to join the battle, but if he received psychic communication, he must immediately retreat. I will immediately step back, the commander lightly tapped the driver's shoulder. Step back, brother. The tank changed from slowly advancing to slowly retreating. The commander stared at the first floor inside the main entrance with an observation mirror and was ready to fire at any time. Quickly, he saw 6 people running out from behind the cover, with the leader holding a chainsaw sword in his right hand and a scepter in his left hand, indicating that he was a psychic. Go to hell. The commander fired his gun decisively. Qin Mo, who was running, immediately raised his scepter and temporarily distorted the physical laws of the shells. So the shell that pierced through the barrel suddenly stopped, then changed from forward to backward, flew back into the barrel, and exploded. The commander sitting inside the tank was not injured because a spiritual barrier was blocking him. When the crew members were blown apart, the commander and ammunition rack survived together. Those with spiritual abilities. Qin Mo continued to run, his gaze scanning all the enemies within reach, searching for the figure of the rebel's spiritual ability. While searching for the rebel psychic, Qin Mo approached the tank and activated the gravity shield, instantly crushing it into a flat piece of metal. End of this chapter. Chapter 7, This is not psionic. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7, This is not psionic. Where is the psychic? Qin Mo looked around but still couldn't see where the rebel psychic was, so he turned his head and asked the soldiers who were stunned on the first floor. These soldiers have been fighting against the rebels inside the building, but so far they have only seen one psychic, and that is Qin Mo. Don't stand outside, an officer ran down from the second floor to remind Qin Mo, let's defend this building together. Upon hearing this reminder, Qin Mo remained unmoved and stood with a gravity shield on his back amidst the gunfire, scanning every planetary defense soldier on the first floor. These soldiers looked very shocked and frightened, and the continuous attacks of the rebels left them exhausted and fearful. Qin Mo realized that he needed to do something to boost morale, so he looked at Gray. Gray nodded silently, looking at the remaining 4 soldiers of the 44th Regiment, and then walked with them behind Qin Mo, each at a distance of 3 meters to avoid overlapping the range of gravity shields. The best defense is to attack. Qin Mo turned his head to look at the rebels sweeping towards him and walked forward. Gray and his comrades marched and fired at each other, showing fearlessness but still having a hint of concern in their hearts. Although the gravity shield allows them to walk peacefully in the midst of gunfire and bullets, in case someone in the rebels uses laser rifles. When he was worried, Gray caught a glimpse of a large number of rebels holding laser rifles gathering in the distance. He immediately turned his head to Qin Mo to remind him, but Qin Mo had already taken action. The physical laws within a radius of 500 meters are selectively distorted, and the hit rate affected by various factors is modified to a fixed condition of absolute inability to hit. All lasers aimed at Qin Mo were deflected towards the ground. Qin Mo continued to move forward for 10 steps, then raised his scepter and vigorously struck the ground. A fan-shaped flame spewed out from the ground, rushing forward and eroding all objects along the path. The metal melted and the human body turned into ashes. The people hiding inside the building clearly saw that this attack alone had eliminated a large area of rebels. Qin Mo raised his scepter again, pressed the button on the chainsaw sword, and in the buzzing sound of sawtooth rotation, said, "For the Emperor." His majestic figure stood amidst the rain of bullets, neither bullets nor shells could harm him at all. At the top of his scepter, the golden double-headed eagle, symbolizing the Empire, shone brightly in the firelight. Every soldier inside the building who sees this scene feels a surge of blood. They feel that the Lord of Humanity sitting on the golden throne has turned his gaze to this battlefield, hoping that his people will show courage. For the Emperor. The soldiers roared and rushed out of the building, fearlessly charging towards the rebels. Qin Mo charged at the front, closing his gravity shield and wielding his chainsaw sword to kill every enemy blocking the way. His heroic fighting posture further inspired his soldiers, and everyone took pride in charging ahead. But Qin Mo's current state is not as strong as he appears. He is actually very tired and numb, his body is as heavy as if he has been injected with lead, and his eyelids are so heavy that as long as the force supplied to his head is used to turn his head, he cannot open his eyes. And this state is due to the modification of physical laws when facing the laser rifle just now. The scope of this ability has been maximized as much as possible, which has drained most of Qin Mo's energy. It was in this weak state that Qin Mo encountered his most feared enemy. The enemy is not a muscular genetic thief mutant, but a purple-skinned creature with a body size similar to Gollum in The Lord of the Rings, with a sleazy appearance. Its name is Brain Maggot Magic Pet. They possess the most threatening ability for psychics, psychic interference. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. The Brain Maggot Demon Pet crawled onto a rebel soldier and gazed at Qin Mo from 100 meters away, his small eyes flickering with purple light. It is obvious that it is already using psychic interference ability. Qin Mo had originally planned to retreat, but he suddenly realized that this guy's psychic interference had not had any impact on him. Both sides just stared at each other for a while. The atmosphere became somewhat awkward. Brain Maggot Demon Pet. Qin Mo. When a puzzled expression appeared on the face of the Brain Maggot Magic Pet, Qin Mo lifted his scepter and released lightning, chopping everything within 30 meters of the Brain Maggot Magic Pet's location and surroundings into charcoal. Resolve the threat, Qin Mo looks around. Under the fierce and fearless counterattack of our own side, the rebels who had long lost their commanders finally couldn't hold on. The people in the rear began to disperse, but most of them were still fighting. Qin Mo was preparing to completely undermine the morale of the rebels. He floated into mid-air and began to accumulate strength to unleash the most ferocious attack. The rebels soon discovered that within a circular area with a radius of 50 meters in their center, all physical phenomena had become very distorted and strange. The metal ground underfoot sometimes feels soft like a sponge, and sometimes flows and churns like seawater, causing those who step on it to fall into it and drown. The bulletproof armor on the body undergoes multiple changes in just 10 seconds, sometimes flowing along the body, and sometimes penetrating into the body and surging in the blood vessels. The bullets fired at the planetary defense forces flew from behind and hit the shooter's head. The bayonet he stabbed himself made a hole in his abdomen instead. These physical phenomena killed all the rebels in the affected area and caused the rebels who witnessed these phenomena to psychologically collapse and flee regardless of everything. Even the planetary defense forces, who fought alongside Qin Mo, were afraid of the eerie power he unleashed. When Qin Mo fell down, except for Gray and the remaining soldiers from the 44th Regiment, everyone else instinctively retreated and kept a distance from Qin Mo. I'm not psychic, Qin Mo said weakly. But the people around him couldn't understand and didn't know why he was saying that. Only Qin Mo himself knew that when the brain maggot demon pet could not interfere with his spiritual power, he was completely certain that his power was not spiritual power. But what exactly is unknown? The soldiers and officers looked at Qin Mo in fear. He just saved your lives. Gray roared at the others, you guys were supposed to be torn apart by the rebels, just like everyone else in the 44th Infantry Regiment except us. Upon hearing this angry rebuke, everyone else blushed and lowered their heads. Shame is real, gratitude is real, but fear is also real. I need to rest. Qin Mo took a step towards the building and almost fell as soon as he took one step. He leaned heavily on his scepter and continued walking. The battle just now completely drained his strength, and he is now only relying on his will to support himself because he doesn't want to crawl in front of so many people. Gray immediately stepped forward to take the chainsaw sword, then took off Qin Mo's backpack and carried it on his own. This guy is right, he saved us. A strong soldier walked over to carry Qin Mo, but Qin Mo just handed him the scepter and helped another person from the 44th Regiment walk. The living medical soldiers stepped forward to examine Qin Mo's body, while the others either walked together into the building or took a few steps to clean up a resting room inside the building. End of this chapter. Chapter 8, Strange Dreams. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Strange Dreams. At night. So, the rebels who attacked your area inexplicably ran halfway. I didn't run halfway, I ran all of it. On the rooftop of the building, everyone sat together, raising a fire to charge the battery of the laser rifle while chatting. Gray explained why he and Qin Mo came over. However, not everything was said. The identities of Gravity Shield and Qin Mo were deliberately concealed by Gray. At this moment, the other 4 survivors of the 44th Infantry Regiment sitting next to Gray also tacitly concealed the fact that Qin Mo was a spiritual prisoner. As for the reason, Gray felt that only himself, the survivors of the 44th Regiment, were aware of both Qin Mo's identity and the fact that he is still alive. If the rebels are to be eliminated in the future, we can help Qin Mo forge death evidence and report to his superiors that Qin Mo is dead. This way, Qin Mo can spend his life in places like Dichao that cannot be controlled. If the rebels cannot eliminate it, everyone in the nest will die, so there is no need to report. As the commander of the 47th Infantry Regiment, I pay tribute to you and regret the death of your comrade. The officer took off his military cap and observed a moment of silence for the deceased of the 44th Regiment. All other soldiers and junior officers also took off their hats in silence. 3 minutes later, the officer suddenly asked the question he had been wanting to ask, "That's psychic?" "I'm sorry, I can't think of a more respectful way to call a psychic. Has he received training and been certified by the Empire?" "Of course." Gray nodded. "Otherwise, how do you think the double-headed eagle emblem on his scepter came from?" "That's good," the officer breathed a sigh of relief. "Otherwise, if he loses control, it will be a disaster for the entire nest and even the entire galaxy." The speaker has no intention, the listener has intention. Gray frowned slightly and lowered his head to recall an experience he had when he was a child in the nest. A psychic rampaged under heavy life pressure. He first accidentally killed his wife and daughter, then cried and hugged their bodies, annihilating a total of 80,000 infantry and armored units from the planetary defense forces in less than a day. This incident even resulted in the planetary defense forces not being able to regain their vitality, which is very far from the strength of the rebels. With Qin Mo's astonishing strength, if a psychic at his level loses control. Thinking of this, Gray trembled. By the way, I don't think he's easy to lose control, do I? The officer spoke again, his emotions seem very stable. Have you ever lost control of him before when he was in your 44th Regiment? Of course not. Gray recalled Qin Mo's situation, and he was indeed very stable. What is his name? The officer asked. A strange name, Qin Mo, Gray replied. A bit familiar, the officer recalled, my ancestors once fought alongside an angel named Qin Xiao. They attacked a space facility called Kareem Gate, and later this angel named Qin Xiao returned to the Golden Throne on the Heavenly Spear. Sir, I once read this story in a book. Is the battle group that angels serve called White, what? No, my grandfather specifically told me that it's not a battle group, but a legion. Legion? Are you joking? Your grandfather must have made a mistake, after all, it was hundreds or even thousands of years ago. Thousands of years? Tens of thousands of years. The members of the 47th Regiment chatted excitedly, while Gray and a few members of the 44th Regiment remained silent, out of place with them. Gray really wanted to go and see Qin Mo's situation, but he was afraid of disturbing him, so he just sat in silence. In the room on the top floor of the building, Qin Mo lay unconscious on the only cushion while still dreaming. He dreamed of shuttling back and forth among the stars, going wherever he wanted to go throughout the galaxy. I also dreamed that I was like playing with a small toy, shaping a planet into the shape I wanted according to my own ideas. This kind of wild and imaginative dream was also experienced before Qin Mo's time travel, it was just an unrealistic dream. But when the illusory dream disappeared, Qin Mo woke up from the bed and found himself in a magnificent bedroom. This is neither a nest nor a battlefield. It is magnificent, and the bed under the body is soft and spacious. When Qin Mo looked at everything in surprise, he suddenly saw a girl sitting on the ground crying in the corner of the room. Strangely, the girl's appearance kept changing, sometimes it was a cat, sometimes it was an old man, and sometimes it was a tank or a logging gun. Traitor! It turned its head to look at Qin Mo, angrily accusing. What traitor? What are you talking nonsense about? Qin Mo asked. I don't even know what I'm saying. I've forgotten a lot, but I don't know why I just want to call you a traitor. It looked confused as it looked at its constantly changing body. Why am I broken into many pieces and you can stay intact? What's your name? Insider, mimetic, engineer or? I forgot, why did I forget these things? I seem to have forgotten a lot. No matter what your name is, you should be called a traitor from the moment you betrayed me. After saying a lot of things that Qin Mo didn't understand, it turned into a male aristocrat and suddenly burst into a frenzy, pouncing on Qin Mo and pinching his neck. You ate my friend. Return it. Qin Mo woke up in shock, sat up and panted heavily, realizing that everything just now was just a dream. Damn it, exhausted to the point of mental confusion, Qin Mo helplessly kneaded his temples and then thought of something very important. Qin Mo found his scepter in the corner, melted the two-headed eagle on it, and took out a piece of paper from it. This paper is the only remaining page from the previously bombed diary. After creating the gravity shield, Qin Mo hid it in the double-headed eagle. Qin Mo kept this page of paper not just for a thought, he always felt that he could rely on science and technology to restore the entire diary in the future. After browsing through the content on the paper, Qin Mo once again hid it in the double-headed eagle. At this moment, the door of the room was suddenly pushed open, and a soldier stepped into the room. When he saw Qin Mo awake, he immediately bowed with a heavenly eagle and said, "Captain, please come over for a meeting." Why do I have to go to the meeting? Qin Mo asked in confusion. Don't you want to go? The soldier was asked in confusion. Alright, I got it. Qin Mo felt that being able to attend the meeting was also a sign of importance from the people here, so he got up and followed the soldiers to the meeting place. When Qin Mo walked in the corridor, all the soldiers passing by leaned against the wall to make way and then lowered their heads. Seeing their appearance, Qin Mo knew that Gray must not have disclosed that he was a prisoner, otherwise even if these people didn't arrest him, their eyes would definitely be disgusted and dissatisfied. It seems that those gravity shields were not made in vain. Qin Mo thought so. End of this chapter. Chapter 9, doesn't matter, I will be responsible for it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 doesn't matter, I will be responsible for it. After arriving at the conference room on the 5th floor of the building, the soldier saluted the Sky Eagle and stood aside, while Qin Mo pushed the door in. Gray and officers above the 47th Regiment sat on the ground, attracted by the sound of the door opening. When Qin Mo walked in and sat down, the leader said to the crowd, "Let's start the meeting." Everyone nodded. Then the group leader introduced himself to Qin Mo and said, "Klein." Qin Mo. What should we do next? After introducing himself, the team leader immediately asked a question, which caught Qin Mo off guard. After seeing everyone turning their gaze towards him, Qin Mo lowered his head in contemplation. In order to provide more reference conditions for Qin Mo, the team leader Klein began to explain what he knew now. The intelligence provided above shows that there are only 30,000 rebels inside the base nest, and we have deployed 170,000 people to enter the base nest, which clearly has an advantage. But the rebels actually have 300,000 people, and even have established an industrial zone in Dichao. They can be self-sufficient. 3 days ago, our front was defeated in a single day, and the marshal and all the high-ranking officials around him were assassinated. Fortunately, before his death, he had already noticed something was wrong and ordered 50,000 people to build defensive positions under the guise of establishing supply bases. After roughly speaking, Klein closed his mouth. "Keep talking," Qin Mo said. "Of course I should continue speaking, but what you don't know is that I can get to the point," Klein nodded. "I don't know anything about it," Qin Mo looked up at Klein. "I'm not a regimental commander or an officer. I'm just a big soldier in the 44th Regiment. I foolishly entered the base and built defensive fortifications. I don't even know why the higher-ups built defensive positions when executing the attack plan." Okay. Klein nodded vigorously, revealing everything he knew without any reservations. Then Qin Mo understood the current situation. Communication interruption. Except for the 50,000 soldiers who were ordered by the marshal to establish defensive positions, the other units that continued to carry out the offensive plan can be judged as completely annihilated. At this point, no one knows where the defensive positions have been breached, where the defensive positions are still preserved, and there is no communication between them. That is to say, the most pessimistic but reasonable speculation is that besides this building, any other defensive positions may have been breached now. Unless someone can prove that other positions still exist. In the end, Klein gave an order that only regimental officers knew, which was that if the attack plan failed, the only passage from the bottom nest to the lower nest would be destroyed. Who gave the attack order back then? Gray was extremely angry. "This is just a fraud. I have reason to suspect that the top management of the nest wants us to die. My family is on the nest, but as far as I know, the attack plan was planned and executed by the marshal himself," Klein replied helplessly. "I think the most pessimistic situation is not that there is no one else besides us, but that the entire nest has already been taken over by the rebels." "Perhaps. Emperor, why did the intelligence come up with such a big mistake?" "Enough." Qin Mo raised his hand to stop. "Our most important thing now is not to discuss whose mistake the attack plan was, but how we should survive and retaliate against those fools when we get out alive." Upon hearing this, Gray put away the words he wanted to continue cursing and nodded in agreement. Qin Mo turned to look at Klein and said, "Has the upper echelons of the army sent you a battle plan? For example, a map with various defensive positions, or something else. Without hesitation, Qin took out a map and handed it to Qin Mo. Qin Mo spread out the map and examined the positions near the 47th Infantry Regiment. There is a position 70 kilometers east, guarded by 2 regiments. There is a position 50 kilometers west, guarded by 4 regiments. The rest is at least 100 or 200 kilometers away. Before crossing over, Qin Mo couldn't intuitively feel the vastness of the Nest City, but now he can feel it. If we want to survive, the first thing we need to do is resist the rebels' attacks. Qin Mo raised his hand and crossed over all the positions. We need to confirm which positions on the defense line still exist and which have been breached. If there are many breached positions, we need to retreat and rebuild the defense line. Otherwise, we need to continue defending. What's the point of continuing to defend? Can we wait for reinforcements? Qin asked. I can't wait for reinforcements, but I can guarantee that as long as I have enough time, I can exponentially increase our combat effectiveness, Qin Mo replied. At this moment, Qin's eyes drifted towards Gray and the other 4 survivors of the 44th Regiment, all carrying a metal backpack, which may be why they were able to immerse themselves in the midst of gunfire and bullets like nobody. Therefore, Qin had good reason to believe Qin Mo's promise. He nodded in agreement and said, I agree. Please tell me your order. Okay, we. Qin Mo hesitated for a moment and then asked, why did you behave like my subordinates from beginning to end? Qin gave Qin Mo a strange feeling. He was very different from Bull, and this guy actually showed a willingness to obey orders instead of ensuring his command. Because I want to live. I don't care who commands, I only care if a powerful psychic can stay by our side, because if there is another attack and you are not there, then everyone in the 47th Regiment will die. Qin said candidly. Qin Mo understood Klein's idea. This guy wants to become the commander of the 47th Regiment directly, because it gives him the responsibility to fight for the lives of all the infantry soldiers. Of course, this is a theoretical responsibility. After all, if you run away like Bull, the soldiers below cannot stop you. Okay. Qin Mo lowered his head and looked at the map, pointing towards the position in the due east direction. I will go here first to confirm if there are any living people on the position, but before that, I will help you consolidate your defense. Firstly, this building is not reliable as it will eventually collapse. We need to make it bigger and larger, and then build an underground section where soldiers can fight on the ground and rest below. Our heavy firepower is too limited, so we must add heavy logging guns and fixed hot melt guns, and reduce each window to shooting holes and observation holes. And then. Sorry to interrupt, Qin raised his palm. There's no one in charge of logistics now. We don't have an engineering unit responsible for building fortifications, nor do we have a convoy responsible for transporting a large number of heavy weapons to the front line. We only have this few people at the moment. It doesn't matter, I will take responsibility. Qin Mo stood up and looked down at Qin. Now, let your people go find me a metal and electronic component. If you can't find an electronic component, then find copper and rubber. Upon hearing the command, Qin nodded skeptically. End of this chapter. Chapter 10, The Power of Star Gods. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10, The Power of Star Gods. In the afternoon of that day, when all the soldiers went out to collect metal and electronic parts, Qin Mo had already started expanding the entire building. This is the second time Gray has seen Qin Mo perform his creation magic, and he is far more shocked than the first time. Under the control of Qin Mo, a square area with a side length of 100 meters became soft on the hard metal ground, which was shaped into the desired shape or attached to the building under his mental control. After one piece of ground turned into a deep pit, Qin Mo began to replicate the previous method on another piece of ground. The entire building was gradually expanded to 5 floors, with walls thickened by 30 centimeters and metal rods floating in the air, with shooting holes inserted into the metal. These shooting holes are all fixed in orientation, but they ensure that after installing heavy weapons, they can be directly aimed at attacking rebels. There are shooting holes that open in the positive direction, as well as shooting holes that open diagonally. After the expansion is completed, those metal rods are stretched, sewn into the wall like threads of tofu, serving as steel bars. The special alloy used for making weapons on the bottom nest floor is not even used by dogs because of its poor plasticity, but when used as a wall, it is the best material. Qin watched as the building turned into a fortress and felt very puzzled. How can I enter and exit this fortress now that the door is not even open? Then Qin Mo gave him the answer with practical actions. The door of the building is no longer directly open on the ground, but has become a semicircular underground passage. Anyone who wants to enter the building must first slide through the external opening and then climb up the stairs. After entering the interior of the building, one must also walk through a maze-like narrow passage, which is lined with thick walls with shooting holes on both sides. Qin felt that this entrance and exit design was truly malicious to the attackers. The wall cannot be penetrated by explosions, and the curved entrance and exit tanks cannot enter or get up. Even if the attacking infantry climbs into the building with strong firepower, they still have to squeeze into a group in the passage and be slaughtered by heavy weapons behind the wall. On the contrary, from the perspective of the defensive side, this is simply an angelic design. Give me a flamethrower and a hot melt gun, and I can hold out for a year under dozens of enemy attacks. Qin first praised the fortress and then asked what he thought was a crucial question, but we also need supplies. How should we transport supplies into the fortress? This luck. Qin Mo raised his hand and the wall immediately opened like a door. I understand. Qin frowned and nodded. After expanding the above-ground section, Qin Mo began to focus on the below-ground section. In order to prevent the underground parts from being infiltrated by thieves, Qin Mo simply dug out holes in the core area of the building that had to be entered from the ground. This is truly a power far beyond ordinary people, Qin sighed. Although spirituality is terrifying, it is really useful. I am not a psychic, Qin Mo said. Previously, he had always considered himself a psychic and never taken those illusions and dreams seriously. And now various signs have shown that I am by no means a psychic, otherwise the spiritual suppression collar and brain maggot magic pets would not be of no use to me at all. As for the source of this power, Qin Mo recalled his hallucinations after being hit by a shell before, and he believed it was very likely a star god. Star god. Before the birth of all races in the Milky Way, star gods had already been born, parasitizing stars to absorb energy. These celestial beings are the gods of the material world, possessing the power to transcend time and dimensions, capable of creating black holes and creating a planet out of thin air. It is easy for them to distort the laws of physics. There are some similarities between the power of celestial beings and the power of subspaces, such as releasing flames out of thin air, causing abnormal phenomena in the material universe, and manipulating objects with thoughts. Qin Mo is now 80% certain that his power comes from the star god, but it is unclear which star god he is and why he has this power. I'm going to manufacture weapons, and once the soldiers come back, let them take what they found to me. Qin Mo didn't want to explain much and turned around to leave. Although the 47th Infantry Regiment can be mobilized at will, Qin Mo does not intend to take too many people away to search for other positions. His plan is still to arm Gray and the others as much as possible. After all, after the expansion of civil buildings into fortresses, more defenders will be needed. In Qin Mo's plan, the 6-person team would use the fastest speed to covertly go to various positions, so he needed equipment that could move quickly. Considering concealment, it is best for this equipment to not be a vehicle, but a miniaturized device that can be integrated into the power armor. So the answer is about to come out. Jet backpack. The gravity shield will be integrated into the jet backpack, which will have the functions of generating a gravity shield, maintaining short-term flight and long-distance jumping, as well as storage. Weapons should also be integrated into power armor and must primarily use energy weapons, as kinetic energy weapons cannot penetrate gravity shields. Wait until there is time to improve the gravity shield and then use kinetic energy weapons. After comprehensive consideration, the power armor that integrates jet backpacks, gravity shields, and energy weapons should be designed to focus more on defending energy weapons. The energy consumption of various weapons and equipment is a major issue. Qin Mo believes that he should design a high-capacity battery that can be charged with thermal energy, so that when the energy is about to run out, everyone only needs to gather together and distort the physical laws within the range to prevent flames from burning metal or human body, and then directly spray fire to charge. In addition to individual equipment, Qin Mo also plans to design drones, which can be classified according to different purposes, such as carrying kinetic weapons or medical supplies, or only having reconnaissance capabilities, or can be used as mobile shelters. Finally, there is the use of heavy weapons for the fortress, which eliminates the need for useless brain cells. It is nothing more than creating logging guns, flamethrowers, or hot melt cannons. Just need Qin Mo to recall the appearance of these heavy weapons in his brain. He can understand the principles and structures of these weapons, and make one-to-one imitations. All of these creations are far from perfect, but it is precisely because of this that they are easily designed and manufactured by Qin Mo. Before, when Qin Mo suspected himself of being a psychic, he dared not create so much of what he wanted recklessly, but now he is not afraid to believe that he is not a psychic. As for leaving the bottom nest in the future, what should we do if these technology creations that have not been reviewed by the Empire are discovered? We can only leave alive first. And in case these things are influenced by spiritual energy. Lying in bed, this is a deadly thing. Qin Mo suddenly thought that among the Jin thieves, there are not only individuals who can use spiritual power, but their spiritual power is also not weak. It is imperative to study anti-psychic technology. Qin Mo plans to first use the principle of spiritual suppression collar to create a spiritual suppressor. End of this chapter.